Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the What's Up podcast. And today we are joined by a new guest, MrBeetleBum from the NA server. How are you doing today, MrBeetleBum?
Very good. Very good. Happy to be here.
Welcome to the podcast. Tell the audience a bit about yourself. What do you do? What's your background in World of Tanks? And
Been playing for 7.5 years now. I originally came over from playing World of Warcraft, and I was getting a little bored of the PvP there because it had basically been, let's just say, easy moded down to oblivion. And actually, a friend of mine recommended the World of Tanks, so I gave it a try and loved it. I've been playing for, like I said, 7.5 years now. In the last year and a half, I decided that I was going to start becoming, I don't want to say a community contributor, but just someone who's just there to help anyone who's new. Because what happened was I noticed that there seemed to be a real drop in the quality of players,
right.
At least on the NA server, that is. And I realized it seems like the issue that Wargaming has, my personal opinion, is simply that the boot camp is great, but it's not enough.
Right.
And I find that a lot of people have issues because it's quite the learning curve, this game, you know?
Yes, definitely.
It's a great, beautiful game, but it does have quite the learning curve. And I find that a lot of people just unfortunately struggle with the basic mechanics of the game. So that's what I wanted to do. That's why I started with YouTube first, and then I went over to the streaming on Twitch. 100% simply just to be there and say, hey, you got a question? Let me help. Because I was lucky enough to have a person who was like that. He was a real good Unicum player. He comes back to the game every once in a while now. And he basically, took me under his wing and showed me the ropes, so to say. So that has become my mission, is basically to be that guy for anyone else who wants it.
Perfect. So, as you guys heard, MrBeetleBum streams on Twitch at twitch.tv/MrBeetleBum. And he also has a YouTube channel where he provides content for players to learn, essentially. So if you have any questions regarding the game for him, if you're new to the game, or if you're just getting back into it, don't forget to go jump by his Twitch channel and ask your questions. Now, today we are going to be talking about a fairly hot topic, especially for new players and for people like myself and MrBeetleBum who like to help out new players. And that topic is, what's the most beginner-friendly line and the beginner-friendly tank in the game? Let's get right into this, shall we?
It's such a loaded question because there's so much more to it than just to answer it properly. For us to do justice, there's so many other, parameters you got to look at.
All right.
But
yeah, definitely.
That being said, we can't just go to, what's the favorite tank and all that kind of stuff.
Definitely. Before we go on to that though, let's hit this nail on the head, shall we? And address the key difference between beginner-friendly lines and beginner-friendly tanks. Firstly, what do we mean by a beginner-friendly line? In my opinion, it means an entire line in a tech tree, like tier 1 all the way down to tier 10, where for me it's got to be a line where the players are able to perform well. The tanks have to be forgiving so that if these new players make mistakes, they don't get heavily punished. But also they need to be learning valuable skills while going through this line. While playing this line, they should be able to learn how to side scrape, how to play hold down, all those sort of different things.
Right.
That for me is a beginner-friendly line, something which forgives the new player for mistakes, but also has a lot they can learn from while playing that line. What would you say a beginner-friendly line is? How would you describe a beginner-friendly line?
Well, I think you actually nailed it on the head pretty good there. The line, in order to be able to tell somebody, look, go up this line and it's going to tick all the boxes that you just listed. Right. That is actually pretty hard in World of Tanks.
Definitely.
What we find a lot, and you already know this, but a lot of people, kind of unfortunately have to find out for themselves when they start, is a lot of the lines that are really, really good that we want people to go up. Unfortunately, it's like most of the tanks are good, but then you're going to hit that one tier.
Tier 8 or tier 7.
I mean, look at heavies on the American line. Perfect example. You get the T1, and it's not that fun if you're wanting to learn a heavy.
Right.
you know, and you got the T1 heavy, then it leads to the M6, but those two are terrible. But yeah, then you get to one of the best tanks in the game at the T29.
The T29, yeah, definitely a fan favorite tank, really.
Yeah.
And then you go from a T29 to a T32 with really bad penetration, and then it's just like, oh no, what has happened there? What's gone wrong?
So there you go. Can we say that would be a great, you know, user friendly? I don't know.
I think that's where the difference between beginner friendly lines and tanks come in. Like the T29 is definitely a beginner friendly tank on its own, right?
Sure.
But if we're looking at the entire line, including the grind up to that tank and then past the tank, then it's a bit more situational. For example, T1 heavy M6, you can't really play him frontline too often because you're just gonna get slapped by everything, right?
Yeah, you're gonna get beat all the time.
Exactly. And if you're coming in from a different game and your expectation is that every class has a specific style that they're fixed in, like all heavies must be frontline or all tank destroyers must be snipers, then you're going to struggle because you'll fail to see the difference within a class, or as I like to call them, subclasses, right? Like you have your, you know, your assault tank destroyers, your tank destroyers built for sniping, your tank destroyers that are meant not to be seen at all. You know, like they all have within a class as many subclasses, right? And if you don't know that there's subclasses within each class, then, you know,
you're going to get frustrated.
A line can, like one simple grind can become very annoying.
Yeah.
Case in point, right? The British heavy line. That thing's a mess for a lot of people, but I enjoy it. The reason I enjoy it is you starting off, we say heavy line, but it starts off at the Matilda, right? Which is a medium.
Yeah, I was going to say Matilda, even though it's medium. It's really where
sort of a pseudo heavy, right? So you have the Matilda, the Churchill 1, and the Churchill 7, and the Black Prince, all of which are pretty decent at side scraping, in all fairness.
Yeah.
Right? Then you go on to tanks like the Carnarvon and the Conqueror and the Super Conqueror, which are really good for hull down.
Right.
Now, that's why I value this line, because it taught me how to side scrape and how to play hull down. But if you don't realize the difference in playstyle within each class, like these tanks are supposed to side scrape, these tanks are supposed to be hull down, these tanks are supposed to snipe, these ones are supposed to hold the position, basically, right? If you don't know that, the line can really mess you up, I think. So on the topic of most beginner-friendly tanks, not lines, what would you say, in your opinion, just briefly, what is...
I have it for each class. I got one written down for you.
Oh, go on.
We're already talking about heavy, so I might as well start there. And the first one, this one I got two. The first one's a no-brainer because what I mean by that is everybody seems to agree with this one.
Oh, I feel like I already know it's
Russian.
Russian
already
heavies.
know what's coming.
Yeah, Russian heavies.
The KB1 line up to the IS7.
Yep.
You can't get any more user-friendly than that.
No, they're very forgiving.
KB1's one of the best training tanks in the game. And the IS7 at tier 10, what I always laugh at the fact that the IS7 has the lowest expected value of all heavy tanks in the game.
I think that's because everyone that's new to the game goes for it, right? Like,
yes, maybe. But I mean, it's got awesome armor, awesome damage. It's just great all around.
It's very forgiving as a tank.
Yes.
It can take a punishment if you make a mistake.
You don't know how to angle properly, you're probably going to end up bouncing a few anyways. Whereas a lot of tanks, if you don't know how to angle, you're burning in like a few minutes into the game. You'll be on fire and dead.
Yep. Granted, with the introduction of like tanks like the Kranvagn and the STRVs and the TVP, all these new tanks that have come out, and the Progetto, like in the past 2-3 years. Granted, the IS-7 isn't as strong as it used to be.
Yeah.
But I still think it's up there as probably one of the most beginner-friendly tier 10 heavy tanks there is. And the entire line itself as well is very beginner-friendly.
There's a reason why people still play them. And the whole line is very... This is the other thing I wanted to say. We touched a little bit about how like some lines are good all the way through and some aren't. I got to say, if we start at tier 5 with the KV1, then you go to the KV1S, then the IS,
then the IS3, then the
257.
257, yeah. And then the...
I don't really have a problem with any of those tanks being an issue tank, I would like to see a little bit of rebalancing with the IS and the IS3, I think. Maybe, but they're still good to learn on.
I feel like that rebalance just comes in as a matter of other tier 8s and tier 7s seem to be very powerful in comparison to them. I agree with you in the sense of Russian heavies up to the IS-7 are probably the best heavy tank beginner friendly line and tanks. I might even say that the 277 line might even be a bit better because it's more up to date and there's a bit more mobility, but you do sacrifice that armor with the T10 and the 277 compared to the IS-7 and 257. Moving on though, mediums. You said you had one tank per one line per class, right? So let's slap those out of the way. I think I'd agree with you for heavies, the IS-7 line being the strongest for beginners. What would you say for mediums? My guess is 430U.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what comes in second, really close? Maybe it's because I'm a little Italiano, but come on, Progetto line?
I think that's going to change after the updates come out in 1.10.
Right.
But
that's why I have it at second.
But I think up to tier 8, it's still pretty good. Even the tier 7 and the tier 6, I enjoyed playing those. Like, that awesome. Line was fun. So, medium-wise, you'd say the 430U line and the Progetto line, right?
That's what I would have down, yeah.
You know, honestly, I'd agree with the 430U. I think once update 1.10 comes out, I dare say the Leopard 1 line might be pretty good.
Oh, love it. Love it.
I know the Indian Panzer's not great. I know there's a couple of terrible other tanks in that line that are terrible. But if you go up the E50M line first and then switch over to the Leo line, you unlock a lot of the modules you need. Firstly, the E50M line's great in itself. I wouldn't say it's my top pick for one of the best medium lines, especially for new players, no.
Oh, no.
But it is once you get to the tier 9 and 10, the E50 and E50M are very forgiving. They do have quite a bit of troll armor on them.
Yes, they do.
And then once you switch over to the Leopard 1 line, you have half your modules already unlocked for you. And if you want to learn how to, if you want to get good at taking shots from long range, the Leopard PTA and Leopard 1 are probably two of the best sniping mediums in game, hands down.
They are, bar none, for sure. Especially now
that they got their buff recently. Yeah,
exactly. That was last year, and that was beautiful. They brought it back to what it used to be.
You know what? On a quickly gonna stick on that for a moment, just to bring it up. Sure. I think another medium that gets overlooked a lot with recent changes, STB1.
Okay, yeah.
That tank it's also got really good gun handling and it's also got really good turret. Of course, you got to get used to how the mechanics work on that, the hydraulic suspension. But that is probably also a very good first tier 10, I think. Let's hit lights out of the way, shall we?
Sure.
I mean, I know a lot of people go, "Oh, EBRs, wheelies," but I think they forget how hard wheelies actually are to play.
Oh yeah,
because it's very easy to overcommit because you don't actually have a lot of view range, and it's very easy to overcommit and then get caught out.
I'm sitting here saying preach because that line you just said right there, guys. For everyone who's listening, that's what you got to realize about wheelies is you see it all the time. We both have watched this happen so many times.
Right.
You get the new players in the wheelies, and they just run out to the middle
and dead.
Lasts like 2 minutes.
Yep. Everyone has this opinion of wheeled vehicles being so overpowered because they keep hitting the wheels, right? The lower half of the wheels. The trick is you got to aim slightly higher when you're leading your shots.
I think this is the only thing you and me probably disagree with because it sounds like you're pro wheelies.
It's not that I'm pro wheelies. I just enjoy my wheelies. I enjoy them. I enjoy playing them, but I'm not gonna say that I'm good at them. Like, I enjoy playing them because they're fast. Like, I enjoy fast-paced games. I do not like slow-paced games. So if I go in, get like 4K spotting or 3K spotting and damage combined, whatever, right? 3 to 4K. Right. I'm happy if I die in the first 2 minutes after that. Right? Because I enjoy the fast pace. I really enjoy the fast pace. Like,
that's a typical video gamer in us, right? It's like pew 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 pew.
Yeah, it's like just
myself, like everyone know I'm completely against them. I
Right.
think they're the worst thing that they brought in.
I
But
do
at the
think that they're annoying. I do think they
same
are
time,
annoying.
I always say, guys, they're in the game. Go out, have fun, play them to your heart's content. Just because I disagree with them because of kind of like ethic reasons, kind of
Right,
like
like
in other words, the fact that they have the smaller in proportion hitbox than any tank is
right.
crazy to me. What lights do I think we're actually extremely close to the one that I would say to go with,
T100
and
LT
that is
is
what
what
I
I
play a lot.
gone.
I actually think the French line,
Ooh,
the non-wheelie track, is probably the best. I know that a
the
lot of people would say
13105 line.
Sorry,
The 13105 line. AMX 13105. That line, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Ooh.
I know a lot of people would say, "Well, wait a minute, isn't the Russian line a lot easier?" Um,
I mean,
I
it
think I've played
was. I'd say. Sorry to cut you off there. I think with the Russian
both.
line, I think it used to be much better when the T54 lightweight was a tier 8 and the LTTB was a tier 7. I think back then that line was really good.
Also, some of these tanks got a little change too. Like the
Yeah.
MT25 is seems to be better, but the LTG seems to be crap. The
Yeah.
LTTB is not playing that good anymore.
I don't like it. I don't. It
Oh.
feels unstable. Like it feels like it wants to just do a barrel roll every time you go high speed on a corner.
You mentioned the 54 lightweight, beautiful tank.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Awesome
Definitely.
tank. And the 100 LT, sure, it's great, low profile. I don't know. I found each one of those, because look at the shape of the MT25, then look at the LTG,
Right.
and then look at the LTDB. I mean, you're going from small, medium, small, large, tall, short. You got like every size possible. Whereas so I found I was doing a lot of adjusting in the first 20 games, just trying to figure out like what my concealment was like on this tank compared to other ones, my strengths and weaknesses. That's what I always try to figure out. But whereas with the French line, I mean, you start with you could start with the AMX 38 if you want. But again, for me, it really started after the Elk, the 12T at tier 6, the 1375, the Batchat 12T, the 1390. They're all so identical to each other. It was a piece of cake for me just to flow through that. And I actually prefer my tier 9, the 1390 I prefer it over my 13105, to be honest with you.
I mean, let's not forget the 1390 used to be a tier 8 back in the day. Like,
yep.
And even then, it was still a pretty good option. Me personally, I'm not a fan of the French lights, especially tier 8 and above. I like the tier 7 quite a bit. I like the tier 5. The tier 6 was all right. I haven't personally played the tier 8, 9, or 10 in a very long time, other than on test server a while ago. But like when I'm playing skirmishes and playing randoms and I see other people play them, I'm not really a huge fan. What I would say,
I would play him in a skirmish, though. I wouldn't do
no,
that.
I wouldn't do him in a skirmish, not at all.
No, not at all.
What I would say though, now this isn't a light per se, but it can be used as a passive light, and it's on the same branch. But instead of going the Batchat 25T, instead of going up to the lights tier 9 and 10, I'd prefer the Batchat 25T AP and the Batchat 25T. You know what I think a good line is for lights, actually? Come to think about it. Now, not all the way up to tier 10, but only up to about tier 8.
Oh,
the Chinese. The Chinese line.
Oh, Chinese. Yeah.
The WZ131 and the WZ132.
Yep.
The WZ132 has always been one of my favorite lights at tier 8, only because it is very similar to the T54 lightweight when it used to be tier 8. Without the armor, yes, but gun handling wise, view range, concealment, it's fairly similar to what the lightweight used to be at tier 8.
But they are a little harder to learn, though, don't you agree?
I think they're less forgiving.
5916 is my all-time favorite light to play now.
Ooh.
And, like I said, the only reason why I went to the French, I really thought about this one, and it was only because I found out, because they're so similar, that it's actually an easy grind. I was really thinking of the beginner-friendly part.
Oh,
because Russians are great tanks. We know that they have great light tanks. I love the Chinese. That's, like I said, that's probably my most played light tank on stream, bar none. It's just because that, it seems to stay the same, and they are really good for passive scouting. But
you know what? I think you swayed my mind there. Then I think yeah, beginner friendly line. If we're talking about the entire line, like
Yeah.
start to finish, then yeah, French autoloaders are
That's
very good, especially for passive scouts. Definitely.
once you get to tier 6, like once you finish the elk, because the elk is really herky jerky and it's way
like it depends on what gun you have mounted and what tier you get
exactly.
into. But then once you get to tier 6, then they all more or less play very similar. Tier 6
Even
all the way
look
through.
the same.
You're not
They
wrong
look the
there.
same.
The design was consistent. You got to give it to the design team there, right?
There you go. There you go.
Moving on.
Yeah.
Probably my least favorite class, my second least favorite class in the game.
Okay.
Tank destroyers.
It's my favorite class in the game.
I mean, honestly, it's just because I prefer the fast-paced games, and a lot of tank destroyers, in my opinion, you need to be more patient with them.
You sure do. And you know what? This is what's great about all of the games that are out there. Like, not just our game and World of Tanks, but, you know, like I said, I came from World of Warcraft. Like, you can't all be the tank. You can't all be the mage. You know what I mean? And same within World of Tanks. You can't all be heavies, or else it would be a real boring game. Can you imagine 15 mouses against 15 mouses?
Jeez.
Like,
I mean, I'd enjoy the farm, yes, but it would be a very, very boring match.
15 minutes into the game, you would still have tanks alive, and you'd just be sitting there shooting at each other. But no, I totally understand what you're saying. We're all different. We all have our own favorites. And with me, tank destroyers, hands down, is well, it's right in between scouting and playing a tank destroyer. Those are my two passions.
Right. So yeah, I'm gonna guess I'm gonna guess the line you're gonna suggest is the German tank destroyers then.
With a caveat.
Oh, go on.
That being is okay. When I did my research, when I finally went up the line. Oh, sorry, no, not when I originally went up the line, but I did my research when I finished like 15,000 games, and I said, okay, now it's time to play higher tier properly.
Right.
But then I kind of had a good grasp on the mechanics and everything like that. The caveat is simply, I believe the Swedish line is the easiest, most fun line in the game to play, as long as you can handle siege mode.
Right.
When you get
if you know when to switch in and out of siege mode, definitely. Yeah.
I hate it personally. I hate it. I keep saying to everyone, like, don't get me wrong. I'm not telling you not to play it.
It's just you personally don't like it. Yeah. Right. I get that.
I need to be mobile. I know that in my SU or whatever it is I'm playing, that if I get a sneak attack on me, I know I can just wham, 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 and I could probably take him out and defend myself. Right. There is not a hope in, you know what, for me to do any of that when I gotta go 1,000, 1,000. Okay, I'm out. You know what I mean? They've already killed me by that time.
Right.
So, but that being said, I also understand there's a lot of players out there, like, you know, like how you said you don't like TDs and I do. Same thing in this case. There's a lot of players out there who don't have an issue. They're always thinking about it. They always get out ahead of time or something. I don't know what it is that they do, but somehow they're really good with it. And for as long as you can do that, as long as you don't mind that siege mode, I got to give credit where credit's due, man. The Swedish TD line is hands down the best TD line in the game when it comes for sniping.
I think
they have the best accuracy.
I think the greatest thing about that line, and it's overlooked a lot, once you get to tier 8 onwards, right? I think the one thing that's overlooked a lot by a lot of people at first see the line, because the siege mode's a huge sort of, you know, shiny sort of factor, right? It grabs your eye, right? I think one of the things people don't notice a lot until they actually start looking into tank statistics, right, is the concealment values of the tier 8, tier 9, and tier 10 with a good crew.
They're unbelievable.
The concealment on values on those tanks is insane.
Yeah.
Like,
exactly. That's why I'm saying, like, as a sniper TD, like a sniper.
As long as you prevent yourself from getting spotted and you switch out in and out of siege mode like quick enough and at the right time, then it's probably one of the best tank destroyer lines to play. If we're looking at tanks that are supposed to be frontline, you know, bunkers essentially, then, and if we're talking about beginner friendly lines, not necessarily tanks, I kind of got to give like an edge to the UK line only for consistency.
Okay.
Right? The 82 onto the 88 onto the 87, then the AT-15, then the Tortoise, then the Badger.
It's the same damn tank all the way to tier 9.
Yeah, with a couple of changes here and there all the way through. Now, granted, they're not all as good as each other, tier for tier. right? Like the Tortoise, hands down, is better than all of them tier for tier. The 82 probably comes in at second place for me, right? In that line in its
I
own.
agree. I'm glad you said that.
Right?
I think the tier 5 is wonderful.
The tier 5 is amazing, regardless of if you use the normal gun or the derp gun. If it still has that, I can't remember. It's been a while. The Tortoise is wonderful. The Badger's fairly decent as long as you hide the lower plate.
The same thing, man. You said it perfectly. I mean, I said they're all the same, and you said it perfectly by saying, yeah, there's little differences. There's subtle differences between each one, and there has to be to give you a little, or else you're going to get bored. But the reality is they look the same, they play the same, they're slow.
They all have relatively, like tier for tier, when you like take each tier into consideration, the reload time is more or less proportional all the way through, right? The rate of fire is fairly similar all the way through. It's a smooth transition from one tank to the other. And not to mention, they all have more, except the Badger, they all have the same weak spot.
Yeah, so it's easy to remember.
It's easy to remember, and it's easy to adjust for that. Granted, the cupola position can change from one tank to the other, but you know that's what you gotta hide. So the information you learn while playing the tier 5 on how to hide your cupola, like peek with this part of the cupola hidden behind the corner and just peek around just a bit so you can shoot, right? Or don't like go around the corner like with your side out because you're going to get drive wheel tracked, right? Like kind of side scrape out if you need to, whatever, right? All those sort of little differences, it's consistent all the way through, and you learn from one and you'll like take your learning from that on, like the lessons you learn from that you will convey onto the next tank, right? You'll learn some things about the 82 which will translate into the 88, and from there you'll learn more which translates into the 87, and so on all the way up to the tier 10. And that's what a beginner friendly line is, right? It's like you're learning as you go along, and the learning still stays relevant all the way through. So I honestly I'd say it comes down to learning about the tanks, like going into tanks.gg or whatever and just like looking at the tanks, doing your homework. Yeah, exactly.
That's what I did when I started, man. I keep saying that in hopes that people who are listening to me on the stream or in the videos that I make, I hope that they go, oh, okay, well, he said he actually went to Tanks GG and WoT Wiki and everything that was available. I love Tanks Guru that Cody Menz does. He doesn't really do it anymore, but that was like when I first came in the game, he was in his prime with that. And it was all about the weak spots. That's where you'd go to learn all the weak spots and stuff. And yeah, I hope that beginning people know that. I like play the game for a couple months. Don't research anything. Just play the game for fun. Or even in just a month if you're playing it quite a bit. And if at the end of that time, whatever it is, 1 week, 2 weeks, 1 month, 2 months, whatever you allocate for yourself, at the end of it, if you think, okay, I kind of like this game. I don't want to spend money on it, but you know what? I think maybe I'll stick around. Maybe I'll join a clan. Maybe I'll try other stuff out. At that point, you know, it's time to like, okay, well, let's go learn some stuff about it. Watch some videos, listen to podcasts like you're doing, you know, that kind of stuff. And that's what you need to go from a person who doesn't know how to play the game. Then you can go into being like more aggressive, higher level strategies, you know, getting into clan wars, skirmishes, ranked, and so on and so on and so on. All those are completely different beasts than your normal, you know,
random battles,
battle or whatever. Yeah.
All right, so tank destroyer line. I think we agree that the STRV line is the Swedish tank destroyers are probably the best for beginners to start off with, just because they've got great concealment and great gun handling. As long as you can get the hang of the siege mode. If we're talking about assault tank destroyers, not the stealthy tank destroyers, then probably the UK line. I do think I'm gonna give a special mention to the 2684 line, just because it's a very nice line to play in general. I mean, there's a lot to learn from that line in itself, so I think I'm going to give that a special mention. I wouldn't say it's a beginner-friendly line completely, and it's like the best tank destroyer line to play, no. But there's definitely a lot to learn from both sections in that line. You know what another good line is, for, like, in my opinion?
What's that?
Up to about tier 8, right? I mean, tier 9 even, maybe. Tier 10, not so much, but the alternative British tank destroyer line. The Achilles, Challenger, Charioteer, Conway.
You like that, eh?
They're pretty decent. The guns are very nice on those. The Achilles, Challenger, Charioteer, and Conway, like, they progress slowly. Like, the Achilles plays one... Now, granted, you got to go through the Valentine and the 82 to get to the Achilles, right? But the Achilles plays very similar to the Hellcat, right? So it's fairly decent. Then you go on to the Challenger, which once again plays fairly similar to the Achilles, just you want to be a bit more passive. You can't be as aggressive. Like the Achilles, you can kind of play it as a medium if you really wanted to. The Challenger, not so much. You got to be a bit more careful, but you have mobility, you can rotate and whatnot. Then you get the Charioteer, which has really good mobility. I love the Charioteer for its mobility. Honestly, like, if we're thinking best tank destroyer in-game, premium and non-premium, right? Most people are going to say Scorpion and SU-130 PM, right? Honestly, I found that the Charioteer is essentially the Scorpion G's non-premium counterpart. The guns are very similar. You get the Prem Hesh rounds, I believe, on the Charioteer, if I'm not mistaken. Right? And against Tier 6, those things are deadly. Right?
Oh, for sure.
And you have insane mobility for a tank destroyer on the Charioteer. Like, that thing can shift. It's a fast tank destroyer for a tier 8 tank destroyer. Compared to all the other tier 8 tank destroyers, the only thing that really comes close besides the Scorpion and SU is probably the UDES. But that doesn't have a turret, and I have a bias towards turreted tank destroyers, to be honest. But like, I really think the Charioteer is up there as probably being tier for tier one of the best tank destroyers. The final class, artillery.
Sure.
This is one of those where it's kind of touch and go with a lot of the lines, right? Like, I mean, the British line has great gun arc from tier 8, tier 9, tier 10, but the tier 5 and 6 have zero range. The tier 7 has good mobility. The tier 6 has good mobility. The tier 8, 9, and 10 don't. So it's kind of all over the place, I think. American and German.
I would go all day long. I'd go American. I wouldn't even recommend German's good, but as for a beginner, I would say American all day long. I would actually have you got German as your number 2, even though they're so huge and slow. I would actually say Russian would be my number 2 because they are so easy.
I think for me, German and Russians would be tied in number 2. I couldn't pick one over the other. I think that probably comes down to my. I think it comes down to my lack of battles in artillery.
Sure.
But from my experience commanding like skirmishes, clan wars, and even just playing with platoon mates that like artillery, I think I'd have to put it as a tie for second place between German and Russian. But I agree with you completely on American being at the top, because you have the M44, which is a great credit maker. Like, you have the M40 and the M53, which are very nice tanks, and the T92 is very nice, and all three of them play very similar. The M41 HMC, M44, M12 play very, like, across the board, the entire line all the way through plays very similar. There's no drastic change in how they play. Alright, bringing the conversation to an end now, let's touch on one thing we haven't yet touched. Just real quick, right? If you had to pick one line out of the entire, out of all the tech trees across all nations, what would be the worst line in your opinion?
Oh, we went the other way.
For beginners.
I'm laughing here. I'm thinking my favorite one. The worst line?
The worst, yeah.
Well, I kind of touched on the T57 just because even though they fixed it, it's still such a pain in the ass when you go from a light to a medium to a heavy. There's actually a few lines like that, though.
I think they sort of started to fix it up when they removed a lot of the lower tier tanks and made them collect the vehicles. That was definitely a huge change that made life a bit easier.
Still terrible, though. It's still such a horrendous.
It is.
Going up that. I know someone right now who's doing it, and they're at tier 9, and they're screaming at me. And this is a person who's played a while, so it's still really, really, really bad. I'm a little bit weird though. I really didn't like. I don't like the Japanese heavies.
No,
everyone says they're OP control and everything.
They're not anymore. They used to be fairly powerful, but now they've like their HE guns got nerfed terribly a while back.
I personally hate that whole line.
Yep, the line I find the most awkward, in my own opinion, right? Now I know a lot of people will be thinking British heavies, but I love my British heavies. I'd never insult them by calling them my least favorite line for beginners, because I do think there's a lot to learn from it. I kind of agree with you with the T57 heavy line. I do think they've sort of fixed it up now because there's the M4, the E8, the T20, then T69, then E1, then T57 Heavy. The last three sort of play fairly similar. The first three don't really. The first two do. The T20 sort of in an odd place where it leads onto the Pershing and it fits in with that line. So maybe they should consider making a tier 7 auto-loading medium. Just food for thought, World of Tanks. That might fix their problems with that line, to be honest. I mean, there is stuff to say about the American Heavy line up to the E5. Because the T1 Heavy, the M6, the T32, and M103 aren't really that great.
Yeah, we talked about that one before. You're right. That is a terrible one.
And the E5 is not that great either, but that's getting a buff soon, so that should fix that. Honestly, I think, in my opinion, I'm just looking at it. There's a lot of lines that are pretty bad, right? But honestly, I think, hands down, the worst line, in my opinion, and probably the most useless line as well, right? The one that nobody plays, and for good reason, the French Heavies, and I'm not talking about the autoloaders. I'm not talking about the autoloaders. The M454. That line, the M454 line.
I got my cursor on it right now. That's why I said it, man.
It's terrible.
It's terrible.
Like the B1, BDRG1, ARL's kind of all right at tier 6.
Oh, I love the 44. I love the ARL 44.
Yeah, the ARL 44 is all right at tier 6. Again, this is going back to what we were saying about how most tanks at lower tiers are slightly easier. And then you go to the M445, the 65T, the M451, M454. There's no point in those tanks, right? Like the M454 came out as supposedly supposed to be like a hull down sort of heavy, but the Super Conqueror's there already. The Kranwagen's there already, right? Like there's no place for the M454.
No.
It doesn't fit in anywhere. Nobody uses it. Nobody plays it, and for good reason.
What about the 50B? I actually
like that line. I like that line. That line is... I love my 5100. I think the 50B has its place, especially in Clan Wars. Like, yes, there's the Kranwagen and the T57 Heavy as well. But the three of them, the 50B, the T57 Heavy, and the Kranwagen, all have slight variations in how you play them.
Yeah.
Very slight.
The M454 I think is not needed at all.
It's not. It doesn't fit in anywhere, right?
Could be removed.
I think...
It's so funny you said that, dude, because that's what I was going to go with. But I just can't help but keep going back to like how much pain I went through the T57 and how everyone I know that's playing it, especially one player is hating it. I think still annoying as hell.
On that topic, on the topic of French line, I think there's one more that deserves a special mention for being terrible in the French line. The tier 9 and tier 10 are pretty decent. But from tier 4 to tier 8, it's just awkward.
Oh, you're talking about the TD?
Yeah, the tank destroyers.
Yeah, oh, for sure.
The SAU 40, S35CA, ARL V39, AMX AC 46, AMX AC 48. They're just kind of in that place where nobody really plays them. Like the V39's all right. The AC 48's all right. The S35CA is all right, but there's nothing special about them. You get the same sort of playstyle from the like Russian tank destroyers, right? Like
you get the bathtub a lot, but again, that's the tier 5 one, right? And tier
5's all right. It's just,
but that's it. The V39 and the AC 46. Oh my,
yeah.
Like, no, thank you. Even the 48, I don't like.
Yeah.
But once you get up to the Foch and the Foch B,
then it's all right. Then it's sort of
then you got yourself a pretty damn. It's got the stupid antenna or whatever it is that your weak spot on top of its head. I don't know, whatever that thing is. Anyways, other than that, it's a pretty darn good tank. But you're right. That line is pretty. I think the only thing that keeps it going is the fact that people are just so excited.
Yeah.
It's almost got a mystique to it that people, because you know what's funny? You always see people in the bathtubs, and they're not people who are playing it for like 10,000, 15,000 games. There's always people grinding up. The question I'd like to know is how many of all those people who grind up the line actually make it to a Foch?
Right. And how many just give up halfway through?
Like tier 7 or tier 8, you know what I mean?
I mean,
5 is good, but then once you get into 6, it's like the complete opposite. 7's terrible. 8's pretty terrible. I mean, what keeps them going on those? But
I mean, on the topic of useless lines, the one last useless line that I have to call out: the Chinese tank destroyers.
oh, you don't like them?
It's not that I don't like them. I just don't
Yeah.
see their purpose when you've already got the Russians.
Yeah, you already got the Russians. Yes, true.
You've already got the Russians, which are very similar in gun handling. I mean,
Yeah.
the tier 6 and tier 7 Chinese look all right because they're low profile. But the tier 8, 9, and 10 are literally just rip-offs of the SU, SU-152, SU-152, ISU-152, and 704, but just bigger
I
targets.
think we're going to keep seeing that, though. I mean, because they got to keep bringing stuff out, and they can't keep putting it into Russia.
Yeah, but I feel like...
I think we're going to see a bunch of that.
I mean, I guess the reason for the similarities between the Chinese and the Russian is historically the sharing of blueprints and the supporting of each other. Like, you see it with the 5A and the 277, the 14 and the T10, the 110 and the IS-3, the IS-2 and IS, Type 58, T-34, 85M, Type T-34, T-34. You see the similarities. 121, 430U, you know, the 132 and the lightweight. But, again, it's like a redundant...
That's history.
It's a fairly redundant line, I think, and like that's why you don't see many of them out there. There's just better alternatives.
I think their armor is pretty good. Their frontal
It's all
armor.
right.
It's like the Russian. I think they troll a bit. Some people like them just because they get into it, and it's like it's not Russian. There are so many people that have said to me, "Man, I don't play Russian because," and for the same reason,
because it's a Russian bias, right? Like
some people have told me that they play the Chinese line simply because
they don't like playing Russians. I mean, I get that, but
it's good.
I mean, the Russian line's definitely better. Like the Russian alternatives are definitely have the slight edge. And
we agree on that.
On the topic of like for beginners, I think if there's a line that's very similar to another line and it's got the very slight edge, like we were saying with the American assault tank destroyers and UK assault tank destroyers, right? They're very similar, but across the board from start to finish, the UK has slight edge here and there, right?
Yeah.
Overall. So if you have that slight edge, use it, learn from it, and then move on to the things that don't have that edge.
Do the Russian one first,
and then move on to the Chinese,
if you want, kind of thing.
Right?
I agree.
Well, I think that brings an end to our conversation here. But thank you for joining, MrBeetleBum.
No,
it was a pleasure having you. I think by far raw recording for the viewers here. Out of the raw recordings, of course, you guys are all gonna hear the edited version where I cut a couple of parts out here and there. But off just pure start to finish from recording conversation wise, this has been the longest I have hit. 2 hours of recording. So thank you for the conversation, dude. I definitely appreciate it. Thanks for coming by, guys. Once again, in case you don't know, MrBeetleBum streams on Twitch at twitch.tv/MrBeetleBum. He also has a YouTube channel. Don't forget to go check him out. Mr. Beetle, is there anything you'd like to say to the viewers?
Not at all. Other than just, guys, if you're new, take your time. Don't rush up the ladders too quick. Enjoy the game. It's an awesome game. Take time to learn it. Listen podcasts like Ixta here and just enjoy the game. And don't be afraid to ask questions either. A lot of people that are new feel like, toxic community, whatever, I don't want to say anything. Not at all. Go ask questions, whether it be on a stream, podcast, whatever's available to you. Go and do your research, ask questions, and enjoy the game.
Once again, guys, if you have any questions about the game, if you're new to the game or just getting back into it and you have questions that are unanswered by the community, don't forget to go by MrBeetleBum's stream. Ask your questions there. I'm sure he'll always be happy to give you an answer.
Always.
Don't forget, guys, I also stream on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays at twitch.tv/Ixta101. Don't forget to check out the podcast website. Link will be somewhere. You should be able to find it down in the description of the podcast. Have a nice one, guys. See you in the next episode. If you have any opinions that may differ, or if you agree with us on what the most beginner-friendly lines and tanks are, don't forget to leave it on the comments section down below for this podcast episode on the website. See you all in the next one. Take care. Have a nice day, everybody.